Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 17, Waiver Wire Edition. We have made it. Fantasy championships on the line. Let's get those minds and fantasy lineups right and take home that championship gold. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. And again, great day to go through the waiver wire and also just cover, guys, some of the hot and cold streaks that have been going on and finding out once and for all if we can attempt to trust these guys with our entire season on the line. What could go wrong? But of course, we got joining me today, the one, the only, Matthew Freedman. Freedman, how was your football experience the last few days?
Football experience has been good, but I will be honest, it has taken something of a backseat to the skiing experience in New Hampshire. And I will say I had like a really perfect moment where I was skiing and listening to the podcast last night that you and Dwayne did. And Dwayne actually said something last night. He was like, you and me are just like in here grinding and Freedman's probably like out skiing. And absolutely, he was correct. I was skiing as I listened to those words, but I was still listening to the Fantasy Life Show while skiing. So I feel like I was multitasking and still being productive.
Awesome start. All right, guys, with that, let's head into our DraftKings opening lines. Plenty of news on this Monday. We have quarterback freaking injury hell going on. People, luckily, Josh Allen is not one of them. He is dealing with a foot injury. However, described just as Thorns considered day-to-day, and Sean McDermott does expect him to suit up in what should be a fun Week 17 matchup there against the Eagles. Going to be some bad weather going on there, so keep an eye on the radar as the week goes on. But at least number 17 will be under center. Maybe we'll not be seeing another MVP, though. Freeman, Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, obviously had that back contusion on Sunday Night Football, took him out for the rest of the game. Harbaugh said, quote, "It doesn't look like it's more than that," and he's getting the treatment now, considers him day-to-day. But Harbaugh always seems to consider Lamar Jackson day-to-day. It seems like this is always, one of the hardest injury situations for us to get a hold of. So going to be the Ravens in Green Bay this week. Now, it's not every day that you see a team with a former Pro Bowl quarterback like Tyler Snoop Huntley ready to go. God forbid Lamar is not able to suit up. I kid, that still just remains one of the biggest weird things to happen of the 21st century. But Freeman, if we do see Lamar out there, what's your trust level at this point? Because I don't think having a serious back contusion is necessarily going to bring back that rushing production we've been hoping for.
Yeah, the trust level would be near zero. I don't think it's going to impact, Derrick Henry all that much, but Henry would be kind of the only guy on that offense that I would trust whether Lamar is in or out. And looking at the betting market to try to get a sense of how, things are going, the Ravens right now are 2.5-point underdogs on the road for this week going against the Packers. It seems as if the market is kind of indicating it's probably not going to be Lamar Jackson.
Again, if Lamar is active, we'll see where he ends up in the ranks, but certainly re-injury risk is possible. He still remained a very efficient passer this year. 8.1 yards per attempt, tied for the third highest mark. And honestly, guys, before he did get injured Sunday night, was looking smooth out there again, getting Zay Flowers very involved. So hopefully it is indeed not too big of a deal, but certainly would have other plans if, again, you were lucky enough to make it past Week 16 with Lamar under center. Also note Chiefs quarterback Gardner Minshew ACL is not torn, which is good news. However, it is still a severe knee injury. He is going to be on IR, which means that we are probably going to be seeing, not a very good quarterback under center for Travis Kelce's last game at Arrowhead. So they did go ahead and sign Shane Buechele. We got some wild names going on in Kansas City these days. Could also be Chris Oladuka. And, again, just in a matchup against the Broncos on a short week there, what could go wrong? Also note that for the Commanders, we have another backup quarterback situation. Josh Johnson getting the majority of starting reps in practice with Marcus Mariota and Jaden Daniels unlikely to suit up here this Thursday. Jets will once again be starting Brady Cook for reasons. I would be guessing that probably the next big news we get out of the Jets organization is that Aaron Glenn has been fired. Not a fortune, teller or anything like that, but just don't know exactly what he does these days in New York. And also know that the Packers are, quote, not expecting to sign a quarterback this week. Presumably good news for, again, either Jordan Love getting out of the concussion protocol or Malik Willis, who is dealing with a right shoulder injury. So, Freeman, in terms of your kind of team-wide implied total projections and just, points against the spread, if you will, how big would drop-off is it from Jordan Love to Malik Willis? Because, again, just among backup quarterbacks, Willis has done an admirable job over the past two seasons.
Yeah, Willis is really good. I think the bigger thing is that, all right, so one, I'll just answer the question. It's about 4 points, but that kind of also factors into the idea that you change the offense with Willis in there. He isn't the starter, so he doesn't get the normal reps. If it were just kind of like one clean transition to the next, it would probably be more like 2.5 or 3 points. But because it is a sudden transition and you do have a shorter week, I have it at 4 points.
Certainly has been a far more run-heavy offense when we have seen Malik Willis under center, and I do agree again with the general 4-point discrepancy, but not to say Malik hasn't improved quite a bit based on the guy that we saw in Tennessee. In running back land, only major news I saw was, again, Chargers RB Kamani Vidal dealing with that neck strain. Considered day-to-day, could miss some time with the belief is not serious, which is good news. I would say the most pertinent injury update among wide receivers, though, goes to Amon-Ra St. Brown, listed as a DNP in their estimated Monday practice report. So again, they don't actually practice on Monday, but they're still obligated to send out injury updates. So not good. Originally, I was kind of thinking it was nothing, but Dan Campbell actually was asked about it, and he said the Lions are, quote, hopeful it's irritation from the game and nothing serious. So we'll find out soon. But yes, our one true sun god certainly didn't put forward the best week 16. Might be tough to do so in week 17 if he is going to be working out less than 100%. Also, per Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco himself. So this situation is kind of wild right now, guys. We're operating, again, under the assumption that we haven't gotten news just yet. It is 5 p.m. here in Eastern time, but Steelers wide receiver DK Metcalf claims that a Lions fan called him a racial slur and also made a crude derogatory comment about his mother. There was video in the stands that mostly just seemed to sound like, again, not an attorney here, just allegedly based on what I'm hearing from some of the video, it sounded like the fan was just almost calling DK by his real name out there, ended up getting his hair pulled and then, kind of shoved back away. So we'll see what happened. The fan did deny it in a statement from a Michigan law firm. Apparently Metcalf reported the same fan to Seahawks security last season. Freedman, it doesn't look like he threw a punch. That said, I'm pretty sure the NFL is not going to be pleased with him, again, pulling a fan kind of down into his face. I think Metcalf is at least suspended for week 17, if not longer. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, different camera angles. It's like the Zapruder film where you're trying to really see exactly what happened. But anytime a player interacts with a fan, that's obviously not good. I will say, it seems like if I'm remembering, there was some precedent of Lamar Jackson having an interaction with a fan early in the season. And I don't think it was to the level of the DK Metcalf interaction, but it was something that was kind of hostile. And I don't think that Lamar Jackson had any sort of ramifications coming from that. Maybe there was a fine. So I don't know. There is kind of some precedent for there to be some sort of interaction where there isn't someone actually getting punched and a player does not get suspended. So I'm basically just saying I have no idea. I would imagine, if I had to bet, I would imagine Metcalf gets suspended one game, but it seems like it's not, like a certainty. Like there is, I think, some gray area where arguments could be made for him getting to play.
When we recorded last night, I really was under belief that Metcalf would be suspended. When we got the second camera angle, that showed more of a shove than a punch being thrown. I know I'm walking back just a little bit there, but we'll see what happens at the end of the day, and we'll let you guys know once we do. Otherwise, guys, Chargers linebacker Denzel Perryman suspended for 2 games for repeated violations of the playing rules. Most recently took what I would call a cheap shot on Ryan Florian in that Cowboys game, so no Perryman for 2 games, and also no Cardinals cornerback Garrett Williams. Appeared to have torn Achilles. Not good news there for secondary. Let's face it, already wasn't exactly shutting down opposing passing attacks. But guys, that's going to do it for our DraftKings opening lines. Let's get into the show. We got our waiver wire market watch presented by the fine folks at Pristine Auction, going through the biggest waiver wire additions of the week. And with that, let's get into it. Obviously, a lot of these are going to be of the injury-induced variety. And of course, that is going to apply to a Browns backfield. Freedman now, unfortunately, will not have the services of Quinshon Judkins. No knee ligament stuff going on there, but he did break his leg and dislocate his ankle. So I don't know. We'll have all offseason to talk about the potential impact ahead of 2026, but at least for week 17, looking like it's going to be Rocket Sanders and maybe Dylan Sampson. Sampson hasn't been practicing over these past 2 weeks. I will say, based on the official injury report, they did shed the calf designation, so now it's just a hand issue for Sampson. So I would like to think he's on the verge of being able to come back from that, but we don't know. Freedman, based on this, again, let's assume that Sampson is in the picture right now. I would prefer Sampson just with his pass game upside, but they're also going up against the Steelers defense that just held the Detroit Lions, to 15 rushing yards, their fewest in a game since 2016. I would really like to think people out there have a better option than these two ahead of their fantasy championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the Browns being underdogs in this spot, 4.5-point underdogs. You don't think that Rocket Sanders is going to be able to get a lot of clock killing between the tackles kind of carries or a lot of goal line opportunities. So that that does make you think out of these two and what is very likely to be a split backfield, Sampson probably would be the leader there. But again, going against a Steelers defense that has been much better recently. And man, with Derek Harmon, like he really seems to be the run stuffing key to the Steelers defense. And with him healthy, obviously we saw what the Lions were not able to do on the ground. So pretty unappetizing thoughts of starting either of these running backs. But if I had to go with one, it probably would be Dylan Sampson.
Right now in my early ranks, which you can find over at fantasylife.com, I have Sampson out of the picture, and I still could not get Rocket Sanders higher than RB37, which is a shame. The guy's nickname is Rocket. That's something that we should be able to rally behind. But again, he is behind guys like David Montgomery, Zach Charbonnet, Ramondre Stevenson, and Chris Rodriguez, just not trusting this Browns offense. Because who's to say that he's not just going to be in a committee with Travion Williams as well, factoring into that equation. And as we know, Browns offensive line already so banged up that Quinshon Judkins himself wasn't getting much going. I do have a very hard time, again, trusting either of these backups if forced into action. A running back that we certainly can't be trusting here, and if he is still available on your waiver wire, go get him, because don't look now, guys, but Blake Corum has been a top 10 running back in fantasy football over the course of the last month. Hasn't taken away from Kyren Williams. They've actually both been top 12 rushers, but can't say enough good things about Blake Corum. Freeman, I think it's one of these things where, we've seen this happen over the years. Honestly, I remember last season with Najee Harrison. It wasn't so much last season, but Najee Harris and Jalen Warren over the years. And it was like, oh my God, look how much more efficient Jalen Warren is than Najee Harris. And he was. But the thing was, if you look at that efficiency, Warren was more efficient than almost any running back in the NFL. I think that's what we're seeing in Los Angeles right now. Yes, Blake Corum, if you want to say he looks better than Kyren Williams, make that argument, because I think you can. That said, his numbers, they stack up pretty nicely against everyone. So Blake Corum for me, Freeman, my RB24 this week, even with Kyren doing his thing, I have him ahead of guys like Tony Pollard, Tyron Tracy, and Rico Dowdle. Why is that wrong?
I don't know if it is wrong. Since the bye week, Blake Corum has been splitting goal line opportunities with Kyren Williams. So like he's getting some of those high protein opportunities that matter. And then you look at the matchup here. He's in a situation where the Rams are implied, I believe, for the most points on the slate this week, or pretty close to it. They're number 2 on the week in implied points at 29, and then going against the Falcons, who are, I'd say, bottom 8 in run defense. So a lot of opportunities, I think, are going to flow to Blake Corum once again this week. And I mean, yeah, he's not going to be the guy who ends up getting 20 opportunities in a game, but he has a shot at 15 opportunities, and all of those will be in an offense that is one of the best in the league.
He's not getting much receiving work, so he is touchdown dependent. But if we're going to be trusting a touchdown dependent running back, it should probably be from the NFL's number 1 ranked scoring offense that also doesn't have Devontae Adams for another week. So again, more and more goal line opportunities there between Kyren and Blake Corum alike. So feeling good there. I would say, guys, and other running backs to take a look at, God forbid Emmanuel Wilson is still on your waiver wire. He very realistically could be either in a similar situation as Blake Corum, again, getting 10 to 12 touches out there, or honestly, if Josh Jacobs' knee just isn't feeling good, he has been pretty much a game time decision these last few games, could be forced into a situation where he's the starter and suddenly looking at more of a legit upside RB2 treatment. So Emmanuel Wilson is there. And also got to keep an eye on Woody Marks, who I would think could get back because he was shaping up to be a game time decision. Even reporter Aaron Wilson said that the plan was for Woody Marks to play. Didn't come to fruition, and we got word about that before the 1 p.m. kickoff, but we have seen Jahar Jordan, in fact, work well ahead of Nick Chubb, which we didn't know this time last week. So again, Corum, Wilson, and Jordan. I think with no Woody Marks, Freeman, if you were just completely out of the picture, oh God. You know what? No, I wouldn't trust Jahar Jordan over Blake Corum. I would still go Blake Corum. The Texans have a tough matchup against the Chargers. Again, let's assume Josh Jacobs is playing because I think that's the most realistic. I would go Corum, Jahar Jordan, if no Woody Marks, and then Emmanuel Wilson in the ranks.
Yeah, I mean, with the assumptions that you made, I think I agree with you. I'm less certain on the Josh Jacobs starting thing. I think it's possible that with the injury that he had and the fact that he didn't return to the game, at least I believe based on the reporting that he didn't return to the game, I think there's a chance that Wilson ends up actually starting and being the lead back for the Packers this upcoming week. And with what we've seen from him, I believe it was week 12 he had 125 yards and 2 touchdowns on, was it 28 carries and 2 targets? I mean, that was a full grown man workload. He could have something like that again, especially if Malik Willis ends up starting and the Packers have more of a run heavy type of approach anyway. So, the Josh Jacobs thing really will impact this, but Wilson to me kind of stands out as a guy to where if he is starting, he could end up having a really big performance.
And hey, if there is no Josh Jacobs, and yes, I would have Wilson ahead of Blake Corum. I think he's in that top 18 kind of conversation. So I got a banged up Javonte Williams right now, RB19. In front of him, I got DeAndre Swift. I have Josh Jacobs under the assumption he's going to continue to be on a pitch count of sorts. Omarion Hampton with no Kamani Vidal, and then Bucky Irving. I think that's about the range for Emmanuel Wilson Freeman.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And if no Josh Jacobs, I end up moving him quite a bit higher.
100% with you there. Now, guys, I would like to think that you don't have a big-time quarterback need ahead of this week, but maybe you did have Lamar Jackson and you are in an unfortunate situation. I do think Tyler Shuck is going to be your recommended streamer. You can actually read more about that in Kendall Valenzuela's ever excellent waiver wire write-up over on fantasylife.com. But yeah, just to give Shuck some respect, guys, 3-game winning streak now for the Saints, and no wins are not a QB snap, but still nice to see him going out there, slinging the ball, showing off arm talent, really to force defenses to cover every square inch of that field, especially when you do consider the mobility. So no, hasn't, been completely, filling up the box score on the ground ever since he had the 2-touchdown performance against the Buccaneers. But we do know that club is in his bag. And Freeman is just a situation where, once again, blessed with a good matchup against the Titans defense that overall isn't very good, guys. Let's face it, when you do tend to look at, some of these charts that show you rush, pass, and then just overall performance, the teams that are really good against the pass are also really good overall. But just the Titans, since returning from their Week 10 bye, they're 7th in EPA allowed per rush and 20th in EPA allowed per dropback. That's really what we want. We want a bad defense at defending a pass, but actually good enough at defending the run to force the opposition to throw the football. And that's what Tyler Shuck gets in Week 17.
Yeah, I've actually been impressed increasingly by what we've seen out of Tyler Shuck. So since the Week 11 bye, in the 5 games since then, he's averaged 241 yards passing per game. Like, that's a pretty good number. And we've seen what he's been able to do on the ground as a pretty consistent runner. 27 yards per game is what we've seen from him. He's not like the most elegant of runners, but like he's big and he's fast enough for his size and he's willing enough to run. And the thing that kind of sells me on Tyler Shuck is that we have seen him against bad defenses actually be able to put up numbers. And then there's this. The Saints have been looking for a quarterback ever since Drew Brees retired. And like, there's no more chatter in the online platforms coming from the coaching staff, anything, no more chatter about like, oh, we need to continue to look for a quarterback. Like, it seems like they have a guy that they're at least confident enough in to go into next season with as their starter. And I just continue to be encouraged by what we see out of Shuck on a week-to-week basis with his development.
And it's not like he's doing it just in this loaded offensive environment. Chris Olave is the man doing his thing. And I've always said good words about Jawan Johnson as well, but their top 3 running backs are gone. I wouldn't say this is a top 5 offensive line. And again, beyond Chris Olave, we were seeing Devon Bailey be a thing, but now he's out of the picture. They trade Rashid Shaheed. Like, Tyler Shuck, guys, actually making the most out of, again, a fairly limited supporting cast, at least relative to the rest of the league. So he had the, first disappointing start against the Rams, but even then the Saints ran like some ridiculously low number of plays. I think they had like 17 minutes time of possession. Since that game, he has worked as the QB 12, 19, 13, 6, 16, and 15. Again, not a bad floor for someone who, again, should be available in far more leagues than not. So looking at my ranks for Week 17 specifically, I do have Tyler Shuck all the way up there at QB 15. I still have him behind guys like Jordan Love if he's active, Caleb Williams, and Jackson Dart, but I think he deserves to be ahead of Baker Mayfield, whoever we see in Washington, Sam Darnold, CJ Stroud, and probably even Lamar Jackson for him. That's the point that we have reached with this. So Tyler Shuck, mid-tier QB2. What could go wrong with the fantasy season on the line? That said, guys, we got to talk about something just ridiculously gross now. I did not think this moment was going to get here in 2025. I was wrong. Taysom Hill season, Freedman. It's seemingly alive and well. The question is, how much of his performance last Sunday was due to there potentially being Taysom Hill's last game in the Superdome, and how much was it due to, again, the top 3 running backs being out, Devon Bailey being out, and also just Taysom Hill, I guess, maybe getting healthier and being a thing. I don't know, man. He's been horrible this year, just objectively. All right, I'm not trying to be a dick, just objectively. He's dead last in the league in yards per carry. He's averaging 4.5 yards per target. But Freeman, we got 12 carries. We got 6 targets. We got a pass attempt. No other tight ends are out here potentially pushing for 20 opportunities with the football in their hand. And I think Taysom can get it again in Week 17. He's my tight end 7 to start the week, and I hate it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think one thing that is a little underappreciated in this is the Foster Moreau absence. Injured his ankle. He's out already confirmed for week 17. So with no Foster Moreau on the field, you had an opportunity where Taysom Hill was able to function like kind of as more of a true number two tight end in that offense when he wasn't also running the ball. And that meant he had more opportunities in an offense that is dropping back at a pretty high rate. He had more opportunities to get targets. So that also makes him all the more intriguing. In part, that's why he had 6 targets last week on top of the 12 rush attempts. So if you put that together, it's like, wait a minute, he actually starts to seem like someone who's a little more intriguing now. And then you add on the like random pass attempt that he gets like every 2 or 3 games. Yeah, I mean, he actually at that point now with all of that rushing volume, he's someone that you have to consider as, I mean, I can't believe that we're saying it, but as like someone that you would be starting in week 17 championship games.
And again, I don't even know why he has tight end eligibility on the Saints official roster. He's listed as a quarterback. You look at his snaps. He's played more snaps as a quarterback, as a running back, and as a wide receiver than tight end. But we live in some ridiculous fairy tale simulation of a world where he actually is still getting tight end eligibility. So again, if Alvin Kamara returns from this knee injury, that changes everything. Now we're talking about Kamara probably getting the goal line stuff. He's taking a lot more of the pass down work and everything. But it really just is the perfect storm of factors, again, with injuries all over the offense to the Saints right now. So again, just ripped off 15.3 PPR points, good for tight end 7 status in week 16. No, he's not going to throw a wide open 38-yard touchdown to Chris Olave every week, but even amidst that performance, guys, he actually had an 18-yard touchdown reception on a pretty wide open wheel that ended up getting nullified on a holding penalty. So they are actively skimming up the most fantasy friendly plays they have for this geriatric 35-year-old washed veteran. I don't get it, but you know what? It doesn't really matter if we get it. Our job here is to try to recognize who's going to be getting fantasy points and telling you guys to start them. So again, Freedman, I have Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, George Kittle, Harold Fannin, Kyle Pitts, and Jawan Johnson as the only guys ahead of Taysom Hill. Basically, guys who I think have a realistic chance of getting 10 plus targets. Jawan's up there because, again, for the same reasons as Taysom, there's just so many injuries going around that he really could be force fed the football. But if you wanted to flip them, man, who am I to call you crazy? I think there's only 5 tight ends that you can actually say 100% deserve to be ranked ahead of Taysom Hill this week.
Yeah, I mean that it feels aggressive, but if we're thinking about upside and it's week 17 championship game, the people who are listening to this, you're either in the championship game or you're trying to avoid a last place finish so you don't have to get some tattoo on a weird place on your body. Like at this point, upside matters. And so, yeah, Taysom Hill, I think because of the running usage and then now the receiving opportunities that he has because there's no Foster Moreau, he has as much upside as anyone who's not in like that top 5 or 6 tight ends.
And again, it's one of those things where I tried to check myself writing this out because it sounded freaking crazy to me. I was like, all right, is it just early on Monday? Haven't had enough coffee yet. But you start going down the list and it's like, all right, well, we just kind of saw what happens with Colston Loveland and Colby Parkinson. Not to be a prisoner of a 1-game sample size, but, they're certainly liable to bust. Brenton Strange, Dalton Schultz, like Jake Ferguson's done nothing here when CeeDee Lamb's been back. Dallas Goedert gets that horrible Bills matchup. I mean, Tyler Warren and Hunter Henry and Travis Kelce. Like, we have quarterback issues. We have volume issues. Again, I know it sounds crazy with Taysom Hill, guys, but I do think if you're shooting for the moon, he probably does give you your best chance, at least among most tight ends available on your waiver wire. I do want to talk some DST, but to update the intro, Freedman, we actually did see DK Metcalf get handed a 2-game suspension. So out of the picture for the playoffs. I don't necessarily think that there is a wide receiver in Pittsburgh to fully lean on, though. Calvin Austin dealing with his own hamstring injury. If you really want to go to war with Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, okay, I wish you luck. I think mostly, though, we're going to see these running backs and probably Darnell Washington actually get most of the targets in Pittsburgh. Let's face it, that's kind of already been the case anyway.
Yeah, I agree. There's no one-for-one replacement for DK Metcalf. It just makes the Steelers all the more uninteresting, and maybe it means more work ends up going to the running backs, which I guess would end up being like a positive for everyone who's invested in them. But yeah, it does make the Steelers offense all the more unwatchable.
Yes, it does indeed. So should be back there for the playoffs. As we know, the Pittsburgh Steelers already got their 9 wins. Again, kudos to Mike Tomlin for reaching his annual goal. We'll see if they can actually get a playoff victory this time around. Did want to talk some DST, guys, because it's a situation where there are just so many backup quarterbacks that, yeah, you probably want to take advantage of it. I will say most of the really good matchups probably not going to be available in your league. But that said, even though I see some of these rostership percentages on ESPN north of 50%, like if a lot of your league is already dead in the water, I would think they're actively not making a bunch of changes. So look, the Saints have been the group that we wanted to ride with last week, and that worked out great. Okay, Brady Cook took like 8 sacks. They're rostered in 57% of leagues on ESPN, but they're facing the Titans team that, don't look now, guys, is actually playing some good ball. Like Cam Ward said, I think 3 straight games of multiple touchdowns. He's actually finally cut down on his sacks, and just the Titans as a whole have scored, I think, 24 plus points, again, in 3 straight games. So I don't actually love going into the paint with the Saints this week. So some matchups that I do think we should be excited about, but they're probably not going to be rostered, available in your league, I should say, 50% plus. The Broncos obviously going up against Chiefs quarterback Chris Olakuna. Lions 60%. They get either Max Brosmer or JJ McCarthy. And also haven't been playing that well. The Patriots would be best case. Okay, they're rostered in 72% of leagues, but they get Tom Brady Cook there for the Jets, which we feel great about. Jaguars get Phillip Rivers. I think Rivers, the way he's playing, though, he's just getting rid of the ball pretty quickly. He's not going to be taking the sacks and throwing the picks that we're really looking for. This is pre-Monday Night Football, so I stand to be corrected. Steelers get Shedeur Sanders. Packers might get Snoop Huntley. I think the two groups, Freedman, under 50%, that probably have, again, a better chance to upside and are available. The Buccaneers at 32% get Quinn Ewers, and they're also actively competing, for the NFC South crown. And the Cowboys, as bad as they are, probably going to get Josh Johnson and hopefully Quinnen Williams back from that concussion. Between the Buccaneers and Cowboys, Freedman, do you have a lead?
Yeah, it's not the Cowboys for me. I know that Josh Johnson looked really bad last week, but he at least has been in the league a long time. It was like a situation where he's coming in the middle of the game. Now, at least he has, not quite a week, but close to a week for the team to prepare a game plan for him. And the Cowboys have just been so bad that they've made, like quarterbacks that I will say are worse than Josh Johnson. They have made those guys look like professional quarterbacks, like high-end quarterbacks. I don't think Josh Johnson is a good quarterback, but I mean, at this point of his career, he's probably still better than JJ McCarthy. And McCarthy had like the best performance of his career against the Cowboys. They're just injured all over the place. I am not wanting to start the Cowboys if I can avoid it.
Great to see Matt Eberflus, move up into the box and proceed to watch Justin Herbert have his most efficient game in 2 months and not even take a single sack. So really just great stuff going on in Dallas. I'm with you. I do prefer Tampa Bay over the Cowboys. I didn't think Quinn Ewers was terrible last week, but it's also just a situation where if you do have a team like the Buccaneers that I do think can, again, kind of force the Dolphins and a lot of offenses for that matter to play one-handed and mostly have to throw the football, avoid Vita Vea in the middle, that's going to be problematic for a guy making his second career start. So the other two, Freedman, again, more desperate, but these guys are sub 10%. It's the same game, actually. We got the Giants and the Raiders facing off. Now, Jackson Dart, that was easily his worst performance of his young career against Brian Flores and company. And we see Flores do that to a lot of young quarterbacks. So I'm not trying to completely let that, overweight the rest of our sample size in my mind. But then again, it was really bad. And we've seen Max Crosby single-handedly wreck these games. And on the other side of things, the Raiders surprised everyone, including me and Freedman, and you probably listening to this, with how well they played against the Texans. But man, we've also seen Geno Smith take these 8 to 10 sack games, certainly throw plenty of picks as well. That Giants D-line, all season long, I've been so underwhelmed despite all the talent that they have out there. I do think, Freedman, I have more faith in Geno Smith sucking in the year 2025 than Jackson Dart. So if I really had to get desperate, I would prefer the Giants over the Raiders.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, desperation is the key word there if you're starting either of these teams. And thinking about, you mentioned the Bucs earlier. Quinn Ewers in his first NFL start last week made the Bengals one of the worst defenses in recent memory, made them look like a fairly decent defense. And I don't really have much respect for the Bucs and the defense that they've had this year, but I imagine that they could look basically like the Bengals did last week, which is certainly good enough.
Again, I know I was high on the Buccaneers back in like week 11 because the schedule just was looking great. They've had some secondary injuries. They also just haven't played as well as I was hoping for them to play. So I'm not trying to rewrite history or anything like that. I will hold the L on my forehead. Shout out Smash Mouth. But I do think maybe just in week 17, guys, we could get that matchup that maybe helps correct some of those past sins. So again, that was the majority of our waiver wire roundup. But I did want to give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsors over at Pristine Auction and also Trevor Lawrence, who's been playing some incredible football. low key, guys, actually has top 5 MVP odds. I do not think he's quite going to get there, but maybe you do. And accordingly, you should check out this Trevor Lawrence rookie card now available on Pristine Auction. You can find this and so much more cool memorabilia on their site. And we actually have a very special code for you if you are into this kind of thing. Again, guys, with Pristine Auction, there is something for every fan. And if you already registered, you can use code FANCYLIFE when you win an item to receive $25 off at checkout. If you're a first-time user, still use code FANCYLIFE when you win an item to receive $25 off at checkout. But you can also register using code FL20 to get $20 in credits added to your account. So got all the info in the description below. Appreciate you guys checking out. Appreciate Pristine Auction. So good stuff there. Now let's move on with the Fantasy Life Show. We've had a lot of craziness go on in the NFL all season long, particularly over the last 4 weeks. Now we got to try to figure out what's real and what's not ahead of the most important matchup of the season, what could go wrong. But Freedman, I want to start things out with buying or selling really strong 4-week hot trends, okay? So obviously talked about Blake Corum and Kyron Williams doing their thing earlier, but there's actually another team that has enabled multiple top 12 running backs over the course of the past month, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, mentioned the DK Metcalf suspension, meaning maybe more reason than ever for Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren to stay hot. Again, the RB10 and RB11 since week 13. So, no, I don't think they're going to combine for 3 45-yard touchdowns, against the Cleveland Browns here next Sunday. But this week, Freedman, I do have both of them inside my top 22, and particularly Gainwell, and just given the ease with which he's racking up a lot of these receptions in full PPR, I do think we can go ahead and buy into this recent trend.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Jalen Warren, we've known for years what his capability has been and the efficiency with which he plays. Kenny Gainwell is different. Like there were flashes in Philadelphia where, he looked like an efficient player, a good complementary number 2 running back. But really this year he's taken it to a different level. But I will say, there's the idea that if you stick with the same take for long enough, even if you are wrong for like half a decade, eventually you're going to be right. And I will say that I really liked Kenny Gainwell 5 years ago when he was coming out of Memphis. So it's like, yeah, I totally saw this coming. And if you had asked me 5 years ago, hey, is Kenny Gainwell going to be like a guy that you could actually be playing in your week 17 fantasy championship game? I would have been like, yeah, 2025, I can totally see that.
I have long wondered if there's a little something being put in that Memphis water cooler, because we had Tony Pollard, we had Darrell Henderson, we had Kenny Gainwell, all, kind of producing as big-time collegiate players. Obviously took Gainwell a little bit longer to get going at the NFL level, but they also usually had some running backs ahead of them. So love the quote from Aaron Rodgers saying that he wished he could have been playing with Kenneth Gainwell for the past 10 years. Obviously a lot of trust there, and for good reason. The guy really has been awesome throughout this season. So again, low-end RB2s, and maybe I'm even a little bit low on them. Again, they have legit been RB1s over the course of this past month. And again, without DK Metcalf in the picture, guys, more and more reason for these guys to be force-fed with your fantasy season on the line. Another running back, Freeman, that has been balling out recently. Broncos RB1, RJ Harvey, the RB5 since week 13. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins has been out of the picture, but, things weren't going great for this guy always. There were a lot of games in a row with a sub 3 yards per carry average. Tyler Badé was, sneaking in on pass downs. It wasn't crystal clear this was going to be an RB1 experience, but so far, so good. And this week, I do have him, in fact, ranked as my RB12, coming off what I thought, just in terms of the eye test, was his most impressive performance of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I will say in guillotine leagues, I was lucky to have RJ Harvey, and he ended up carrying me to the championship games in some guillotine leagues that I'm in. And man, the 4 games in the sample that we're looking at, I mean, he has been more often than not an RB1, and 100%. If you're looking at the utilization report we have on the site, 100% of the goal line opportunities within that span. So it's annoying that he's having to split work with other running backs, but at least he is still getting those really important opportunities at the goal line. You look at the utilization score, an 82, which isn't like elite, but that's good enough. And a guy who's in an offense that is ascending, and I think this is an ascending offense with Bo Nix increasingly becoming consistent and playing at a higher level as he progresses through his second season. Yeah, like an 82% utilization score in an up-and-coming offense, like that gets the job done.
Obviously, Chiefs defense has been stout against RBs this season, but that was a Chiefs defense, again, still plenty to play for and obviously trying to go ahead and do their thing. As we saw against the Tennessee Titans and Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears going off yesterday, do not think that's going to be the case here in week 17. Sticking with the Broncos, guys, Courtland Sutton, someone who wasn't killing you during the first 11 weeks of the year, but, just the wide receiver 31 in PPR points per game, has taken his performance to another level over the course of these last 4 weeks. 4 straight top 22 finishes, 2 straight back-to-back, I should say, top 10 finishes and overall since week 13, working as the wide receiver 6 in terms of PPR points per game. So he is my wide receiver 13, and Freedman, not that I'm going to be moving him down, but I will be feeling much better about that ranking if we once again see Trent McDuffie sideline for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think we are going to see McDuffie sidelined for the Chiefs. He's been out, or he last played rather, in week 14. And if you look at the splits for Courtland Sutton before the bye week and after the bye week, which kind of perfectly coincides with the 4-game sample that we are looking at. After the bye week, 9.5 targets per game is what he has averaged. Like it became, I think, like a point of emphasis where a lot of teams during the bye week will use that opportunity to self-scout, to evaluate what they're doing. And 6.7 targets per game is what we were seeing for Courtland Sutton before the bye week. The team goes into the bye week, they look at what they're doing and they think, hey, you know what? We should probably get the ball more to the best wide receiver we have on the team. And so 9.5 targets per game is what we have seen in this 4-game sample since the bye. I think that's a fairly sticky number. And again, if no Trent McDuffie is what we see for the Chiefs, and I think that's going to be the case, yeah, I think it makes Courtland Sutton a high-end wide receiver too.
And unfortunately for the Broncos, I think the one guy that kind of could have replicated some of Sutton's intermediate or red zone goodness, Pat Bryant, was knocked out of that game late. So certainly not expecting him to be back in time for Thursday. Last one, guys. Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts. No, he did not score 45 PPR points again here in week 17. But hey, 18.7 still worked out in your semifinals. So he has worked as the tight end 1 since week 13 after Trey McBride's unfortunate week 16 dud. Now the tight end 5 on the season on a per game basis. But if you want to do that thing where you just ignore per game, the tight end 2 overall for Kyle Pitts this year. Fantastic breakout performance. So Freeman honestly could have been an even bigger performance. There was a play where he got held up and then Cousins threw it a little bit high and wide, hit his outstretched hand. So maybe I'm being a little biased there. Either way, a close touchdown connection, regardless of who you want to blame things on. And that came with Drake London back in the lineup. So obviously London didn't have a great game per se, but he was still in a full-time role. So Kyle Pitts, man, again, I ranked him as my tight end 5 this week, but I'm already looking at it and wondering, why not rank him up there at tight end 2? Either way, man, I think we can comfortably say this feels for real, and we are trusting Kyle Pitts in week 17. What can go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Pitts in week 17. What could go wrong? Tell that to yourself like a year ago or 2 years ago, and you would just be like, I do not believe it. But I mean, the Kyle Pitts emergence was driven by the absence of Drake London. And we saw London return last week, and so you would think maybe Kyle Pitts takes a step back. But I will say maybe Kyle Pitts kind of re-emerged during that time to an extent to where within the offense, it's kind of impossible to relegate him back to his prior role. And then also Drake London, just this is sort of the eye test, but Drake London just didn't look like his normal functional self. And so if we're kind of assuming, yeah, it's Drake London out there, but he's not the full Drake London, then I think we can kind of project Kyle Pitts forward. Now, the 99 utilization score, like an obscene mark that we've seen out of Kyle Pitts for the past month, like that isn't something that we should fully project forward. But like Kyle Pitts within this offense, and I will say, with the quarterback change, I have been like not totally impressed with what we've seen out of that offense, but for the pass catchers in that offense, there is at least a stable week to week floor now at the quarterback position. And I think that just kind of elevates everyone. So Kyle Pitts probably won't continue to have a 99 utilization score, but 90s, sure, why not?
And yeah, obviously that one huge game is skewing things, but give Pitts credit. It was a one awesome, huge game. And then even the 2 weeks before that, tight end 6 and tight end 5. So it's not like it's been, a 2-week sample here. Pitts really has been putting his best foot forward for the better part of the last month. And for that, we applaud him. That said, guys, let's turn those smiles upside down again. The guys who have not been performing well and trying to figure out if we can seriously trust them ahead of week 17. Sticking with the tight ends, Jake Ferguson, guys, someone who was firmly in our circle of trust throughout the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season, all of a sudden not looking so hot. And Freedman, I do not think it takes an alleged fantasy expert to figure out why. It really just has been CeeDee Lamb returning back to the lineup. Okay, so with CeeDee Lamb in the lineup this year, Jake Ferguson has averaged just 9.5 PPR points per game. That's good for tight end 18 status during those weeks, and only 5.9 targets per game. Without CeeDee Lamb and that glorious 4-game stretch from like week 3 to 7, 18.6 PPR points per game, the tight end 1 on an average of 8.3 targets per game. So I still ranked him as tight end 11 this week. Again, he's in a tier of guys. If you want to rank him lower or a little bit higher, I'm not going to call you crazy or anything like that. But my biggest thing here is just like Dak Prescott and the Cowboys going up against the Washington Commanders. I feel like Dak could throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and we wouldn't think twice about it. So that's holding Ferguson up here right now. But man, as someone who got paid before this season, it has been disappointing to see this fall off whenever the Cowboys are actually fully healthy.
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of the general range of where we're going to be ranking Jake Ferguson this week. I'll say the one thing that is encouraging, despite like the clear drop in utilization that we've seen from him, the one thing that is encouraging this week, or a few things rather. Number one, wide receiver Ryan Flournoy went out last week with the knee injury. I'm assuming that he's going to be out on the short week this upcoming game. And so Ferguson could see extra work. And then the next thing is just the matchup. The Commanders, I mean, they're number 32 in defensive pass DVOA against tight ends, like one of the worst tight end defending teams in the league. You look at them since the week 12 bye. In 4 games, they've allowed 310 yards and 4 touchdowns to tight ends on 30 targets. Like, this is a matchup that Ferguson can win in week 7. Granted, different set of circumstances, but in week 7, he had 7 targets, had 2 touchdowns on 7 receptions with that work. With no Ryan Flournoy in this game, we could see Ferguson get 7 to 8 targets again. Going against this matchup, that could be good enough for him to find the end zone. And then if that happens, he's a tight end 1.
The Flournoy call, because he's shown a lot of good chemistry with Dak Prescott. I do not expect like Jalen Tolbert to step back into that role and all of a sudden still keep Ferguson depressed like that. So good shout there. Let's move back to running backs though, because Bucky Irving, guys, was supposed to be coming back and saving our fantasy season. Has not been the case though. Just the RB 26 in PPR points per game since week 13. I don't think it's necessarily all on Bucky, but Freedman is this unfortunate situation where whether you want to blame Bucky, the offensive line, whatever. I mean, this dude is the second worst running back in the league in yards per carry at just 3.5. I know that's not all on RB. And guess what? Christian McCaffrey is the third worst running back in yards per carry at 3.6. But here's the problem, Freedman. Bucky Irving is like Christian McCaffrey if he got 0 targets and 0 goal line carries. That's not good when you're, again, being so inefficient. So right now, not Bucky's fault, but he's not getting thrown the football, and there's a bunch of wide receivers, and he's not getting the goal line touches because they believe more in Sean Tucker. So we have a guy who's not very efficient and only really working in between the 20s. So with all that said, I still couldn't rank the dude lower than RB 15, but it feels a little bit like, I don't know, hopium, copium, whatever you want to call it. Like, where do you think you're going to go with Bucky this week?
Man, that's a great call out, thinking about where am I going to rank, because I've been similar. It's like, well, he's not getting the high protein opportunities within this offense. You mentioned it, not really getting the passing work. He's having to split that with Rachaad White, and he has gotten literally 0 carries inside the 5-yard line since returning to action 4 games ago. So if he's just getting all of the carries between the 20s, but nothing that really matters, how high can we rank him? I mean, I guess low end RB2 feels like kind of the right range. But you do know Bucky Irving any given week has the opportunity of absolutely going off, which I think kind of raises the ceiling a little bit and pushes his rankings upward. But man, I talked about it on the Chop podcast, the Guillotine League podcast last week, about how Bucky Irving for me was a flex fade. I think once again, he's someone that I wouldn't feel comfortable starting, because I just know, like, an immediate outcome, he's not getting goal line opportunities. He's not getting targets. Really, what does he offer you?
My mindset talking about Bucky right now reminds me of my mindset literally this time last week talking about Ashton Genty. We all saw how that turned out. So again, Still a talented player, still very capable of turning in week winning weeks. We saw him do that, for the durations of last season and even earlier in this year. But, just again, right now, my RB15. But if I want to go ahead and rank him below Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, I don't think it'd be nuts because those guys have, in fact, outperformed them for the better part of the last month. I do think once I get to Breece Hall, Tony Pollard, like Blake Corum around that RB2 borderline, that's when we're starting to run into guys with similar issues to Bucky. So wouldn't go, as crazy maybe as we did last week with Ashton Genty just to keep on, driving that dagger into me more and more. But again, certainly has been a disappointing stretch run. Hopefully he can make up for it here in week 17. Speaking of big time disappointments, Freedman, Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver, 72 since week 13. Things have gotten a little bit better, but good God, man, that is just ridiculous to have to say out loud. 7 straight games without a touchdown, 85 yards last Sunday was his most in the game since week 5. He's had some drops, I will say. I see a lot of Vikings fans. All right, Thor, I'll say it. Like just saying, when you look at Justin Jefferson and all these drops, can J.J. McCarthy not throw every single pass at 120 miles per hour to these wide receivers? So, whatever. They're on target. Justin Jefferson is professional. We should come down with them anyway. He had 47 yards and a touchdown against these Lions earlier this season. I have my wide receiver 28, Freedman. And guess what? That'd be way too high for the better part of the last month anyway.
Man, the Justin Jefferson stuff is so weird. And I agree. JJ McCarthy has like one speed on his ball, and it's like fastball all the time. Against the Cowboys, Justin Jefferson dropped a pass in the back of the end zone. And I was thinking, like, if McCarthy had thrown that just, like 2% lighter, Justin Jefferson would have caught it. But, I agree entirely. Justin Jefferson entering the season was one of my biggest fades. That paid off. But even I wouldn't have imagined it would be this bad. But then you look at the utilization report, and over the past month, even though he's been struggling horrifically over the past month, a 35% share of the air yards and a 50% share of the end zone targets. Like, the offense is malfunctioning, but within that, they are still trying to get Justin Jefferson the ball. And so there's only so low that you can rank a guy when he's like going full Fitzgerald, when it's like, oh, like he's a great player, an all-time great player, but he's just in this horrific situation because of the quarterback. There's only so low you can rank him, but man, any given week, that the floor is like the grave, and the ceiling at this point is just like the second story, because that offense just absolutely brings him down.
I was writing earlier and I was trying to find like a, just different way of saying like the floor is, because the ceilings to roof's pretty easy to roll off the tongue. Floor is the grave. Good job by you, Freeman. Did not have that on the tip of my tongue earlier. Wish I did. So yeah, again, Jefferson, my wide receiver 28. He's ahead of guys like Christian Watson, Brian Thomas, Jaden Reed, Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, other guys are pretty clear red flags at this point. Probably have to move them even lower though if we do end up seeing Max Brosmer under center instead of 9 here ahead of Thursday's matchup against the Lions. Last one, guys. And this one's kind of surprising because he's not been playing bad real life football per se. And I think this could actually lead into a bigger discussion this offseason. But Jalen Hurts, just a QB 19 in fantasy land since week 13. Obviously, we remember that horrific Monday night performance against the Chargers, the 2 turnovers on 1 play, 4 total interceptions, and that sucked. But since then, guys, he's played clean football, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's even rushed for, I think 78 total yards over these last 2 weeks, and still only giving us low-end QB1 performances. Freedman, I think if the tush push gets outlawed, which whatever your opinions are on it, I just think it's going to, mostly because I don't think the NFL thinks it's entertaining. And I think they're going to kind of go back to the, we can't properly officiate it because of some of the false starts that happen, before the snap. So maybe it's not outlawed and then it's a moot point. But if it is, man, I can still see Jalen Hurts being priced next year as his QB5, QB6 that he's been throughout most of his career. But once you really do take away that impact of all those goal line touchdowns that no one else gets, I think we're looking at a lower end QB1. So for this week, I'm not worried about the slow stretch. I still have him ranked as my QB3 because, again, he could just fall into the end zone twice and it'll be like we're partying like it's, earlier this season again. But, man, Jalen Hurts without that tush push, man, it's like Christian McCaffrey if he's not catching the football.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of his production over the past month has been dragged down by that one horrific game, 4 interceptions, just 8 yards on the ground. But the other 3 games in that span, he's, had sort of like Jalen Hurts type of passing yardage, but he's had at least 2 touchdowns and at least 30 yards rushing in all of those games, to where he's looked like, like basically Jalen Hurts who didn't find his way into the end zone. And you mentioned it. The tush push is a big thing. And I won't say it seems like the league has kind of figured it out, but the Eagles are just running it less. And then when they do run it, they're running it less effectively than they used to. And honestly, I feel like that's good. Like instead of litigating the tush push out of the game, it's good for defenses to kind of find a way, or for the offense just to be a little less efficient with it and just let it kind of naturally die out on its own. So, whether it's, a rule that is passed or whether it's just the Eagles running it less, I think we are in kind of a little bit of the post tush push era. And, if that is the case, it makes Jalen Hurts, I wouldn't say undraftable, but it just means that I think there will probably be a situation where people draft him too high, as you said.
Would hurt Josh Allen a lot too. All right. I hear you Eagles fans yelling at me right now. I understand 17 gets away with a lot of that stat padding, nonsense up in Buffalo as well. So we'll see what happens. Personally, I say if you don't like it, go ahead and figure out a way how to stop it. Again, I just tend to think the NFL will be getting rid of it, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in the offseason. Guys, let's put a bow on week 16 with the Sheesh Report. As if you weren't feeling bad enough about an unfortunate semifinal fantasy loss, I just want to tell you just how close you were to turning that L into a W with a list of players who, again, were so close to having a big performance, but for one reason or another, simply couldn't quite get there. So starting off with players who were tackled at the 1 yard line and failed to score a touchdown on the same drive. We actually had none other than Rocket Sanders for the Browns, having this happen twice on the same drive, headlining things. Also, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving. Yes, that's right. He got down the 1 yard line. Actually wasn't pulled off the field for Sean Tucker. Instead, Baker Mayfield threw a touchdown to Mike Evans. Very cool stuff there. Also, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Chris Rodriguez, and Tyler Algier rounding out the running backs. The Pollard stuff was really annoying because not only did he get stopped at the 1 yard line, he actually scored a 1 yard touchdown plunge in the fourth quarter. And then they said Jeffrey Simmons didn't actually report. They asked Jeffrey Simmons about this after the game, and he literally said he walked onto the field with his red sleeve, with a big arm brace. He's like, I'm a pretty big dude. Had his hand up, and the ref said he didn't see him trying to report. So unfortunate stuff there. But yeah, Tony Pollard, 100 plus yards, could have been even bigger. Also, Keenan Allen, Isaac Tesla, Jalen Hurts, he did throw a touchdown later on the same drive, in Austin Hooper. But the real wild one to me, Freedman, Puka Nacua. He just had the biggest game of the season, and I understand he got the long touchdown in overtime, so we can't just say, oh man, he would have had a 4 touchdown game. But on the first drive, he got tackled at the 1 yard line. And then on their second drive, he got overthrown on a potential 32-yard touchdown on 2 drives that ended in a field goal. The most productive game for a wide receiver this year, and he left meat on the bone.
Yeah, absolutely unreal stuff. What Puka might be able to do in that offense with no Devontae Adams. Obviously, if you're the Rams, you want Devontae Adams in the offense. If you're a fantasy manager of Nacua, you are maybe a little bit grateful for Christmas that we will not be seeing Devontae Adams this week.
And again, we'll see what happens to Matthew Stafford in the offseason. But if we get any level of discount, guys, on Puka just because Stafford's out of the picture, I don't know, man. I think I've seen enough from Puka and also Sean McVay to believe that we're still going to see plenty of upside wide receiver 1 seasons in the future, regardless of if Stafford decides to hang around. Also want to take a look, guys, at unrealized air yards. Again, a nerdy way of trying to quantify the total distance that incomplete targets traveled to their intended target. So when we see Chris Olave at the top of the list, that means that 143 air yards were covered on his incomplete targets, signifying that, again, there was a lot of meat left on the bone, which is crazy to consider, considering he had such a big game at the office anyway. So, again, that really is the state of the Saints passing game right now. Olave, Juwan Johnson, and yes, the artist is Taysom Hill really do have a lot on their plate. Cortland Sutton also nearly had a much bigger game. Nico Collins, Kanata Mumfield, maybe the big beneficiary in the wide receiver room at least, while Devontae Adams remains out. DK Metcalf, Parker Washington, Drake London, Jalen Waddle, MVS, and yes, Puka Nacua once again popping up as well. So again, kind of talked about Sutton earlier, but Chris Olave, Freedman, again, obviously had the huge performance where it's really starting to have the numbers stand out. But, I know a lot of people are just wondering, is he even like that great of a receiver? Because over these past years, he was always headlining lists like this. And it was like, oh, wide receiver 1 usage, but wide receiver 3 production. Hey, it turns out that this year we got wide receiver 1 usage and wide receiver 1 production.
Yeah, I gotta say, shout out Chris Olave, someone else who also helped carry me in Guillotine League this past week. In the 6 games that he has had this year without Rashid Shaheed, since Shaheed was traded, if you look at the utilization report, 53% share of the air yards, 71% share of the end zone targets. Like that is like uber wide receiver one type of utilization. A 90 utilization score is what we see in that span. So Chris Olave, I know, like the past couple of weeks, we've seen like the boom. And before that, it was kind of building a little bit. But I think what we've seen ultimately from Olave, spread out over the past 6 weeks, like that is real. I think what we have seen Olave is representative of who he is and what he can be moving forward.
Shout out to Tyler Shook and Kellen Moore for getting the most out of the Santana smooth route runner. Hopefully, Chris Olave not done just yet. Get you guys another good performance here in week 17. But that's going to do it for us, guys, on this Monday edition of the Fantasy Live Show. Freedman and I will be back soon, though, breaking down rankings. Also, tune in on Tuesday for the utilization report between myself and Dwayne The Rock McFarland. But until then, just have a great rest of your day. Hope you guys enjoy Monday Night Football. So for Freedman, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, take care, everybody.